gives an audio sync for the file.
Okay.
I'm going to do another one.
Okay.
You ready?
Yep.
Hi, everybody. I'm J. Robert Deans. Thanks for visiting my Patreon page, or if you're watching this on YouTube, my YouTube channel. I want to thank you for coming in. We're doing basically a homegrown AMA, so you guys can get to know me a little bit better. I am the writer, artist, and creator of Shakes the Cow, Stanley the Bear from Ant, and a whole lot of other characters. I am joined by the Kidlet, and she is going to actually ask the questions that were sent in by many of you. We got almost 100 questions. We're not doing them all. We're splitting this up into 2 or 3 shows. We're going to do one now, one in 2 or 3 months. If any of the answers trigger other questions you may have, please send them in the comments or to social media. Or if you go to DFP links, we'll leave a button, a pop-up there that you can send in questions anytime you want. Want to, again, thank everybody for sending in questions. They're sort of going to go in order of, like about writing and drawing, and then characters, and a few other ideas, and then down to me, and then we're going to do like a rapid fire. So we're going to just go ahead and get started. And again, thanks for watching, and I hope you learned something about self-publishing, about what we do, about my characters, about my books. If not, I hope you're at least entertained. So what's first?
All right. The first question is from Jamie. What is your easiest and hardest character to draw?
Easiest question to draw is definitely Shakes the Cow, because I've drawn her now for 7 years.
Easiest character to draw.
Right. Shakes the Cow. Not always the easiest positions or things like that, because sometimes I'll draw new ways of posing her. Can take a little time, but facial expressions and things like that. But just by virtue of the fact I've been drawing her so long, she's the easiest. The hardest is Percy, her best friend, who also shows up in the Bear from Ant books. Percy, being an emperor penguin, is difficult to try and find new ways to draw her dynamically. Drawing an emperor penguin known for just how it waddles, but trying to draw Percy running, interestingly, without it looking like a bowling pin about to tip over, that's kind of hard. So Shakes is the easiest, Percy is the most difficult. What's next?
All right, next is from Thomas. How do you combat writer's block?
A bunch of different ways. The TMI answer is I hop in the shower. Because, showering is sort of a mindless activity. You've done it so much in your life that your brain goes on autopilot. Your body's on autopilot, so your brain can start thinking of other things. And what I end up thinking about is stories to tell, or ideas of linking things when in the stories I'm working on. And so I'll either hop in the shower, or I'll go clean the kitchen, or I'll be cooking. But if I'm not in a position where I can do any of those things, I'm usually working on anywhere between 2 and 5 books at a time. So I'll just drop the book I'm working on for a day or 2 and pick up another project and work on that. If I'm in the very strange position of only working on one book at the moment, and say I'm in the middle of writing the book, I'll just stop where I'm writing and move to the end of the book and write backwards. Sometimes I'll, writing a book, especially if it's a Bear from Ant book and it's sort of a mystery, it's easier to write it backwards than it is forwards. What's next?
So, Steve Conley asks, you sometimes make pop culture references and puns which seem squarely aimed at parents, or even grandparents. How do you balance that with the target kid audience?
First, I should say that Steve Conley is a friend and a mentor, and he is the creator of the wonderful webcomic over at Webtoons, excuse me, called The Middle Age. And if you haven't checked it out, please do so. It's definitely worth your time. It's sort of fantasy and funny. It's about a sword and his... Well, it's not a guy and his sword. It's the sword and his guy. You kind of have to read it to understand, but it's definitely worth checking out. And Steve has definitely been a mentor of mine and a friend for almost a decade now. Let's see. The best way to say this is I try to make my books as entertaining as possible for everyone that's likely to be reading this, from the child who may be reading it to themselves to the parent or the grandparent who will be reading it to a child or someone else. And that includes making references for whomever may be reading it. And that includes, making references to my favorite film, which is The Thin Man from 1934, or making cultural references from that same era, or music references from the 1960s. References that a kid may not get, but if that kid happens to hold on to my books for this long and ends up reading them to their kids, they may have been exposed to the stuff I'm referencing by the time they're reading it to someone else. And it sort of enriches the book for them. But even if not, the parent or grandparent hopefully will understand the reference and appreciate it as just a nod to them. I've always tried to make my books enjoyable for the parent who likely will have to read it multiple times to their child. And that is actually something I've actually received thank you emails from parents who said, I've had to read your book several times to my kid in the same night, so thank you at least for putting in things that the parents can look forward to. So that's kind of why I do it. Who's next?
Mike sent in a lot of questions. The first of his over 60 questions is, why did you select a cow for your main character?
It's your fault.
Sorry. Not sorry.
Her first toy out of the womb, basically, was a stuffed cow. And one day, I forget how old you were, but I was just doodling, and I drew your stuffed cow in a spacesuit.
I was like 8 or something.
Maybe younger than that, but that I put that drawing away, and then later on, it was just the story came to me, and I took that story and ran with it, and created the book MOO THOUSAND and PUN. So that's why Shakes is a cow. So
family. Connor, age 12, is curious about what is next for Shakes and/or Percy.
Connor is a young lad who comes to my table every year at Baltimore. He's one of my biggest fans. Well, actually, the 6th Shakes book is coming out early next year. And if you've read Temple of Mood, and you remember what happened in that one, they ran into a tribe of cows called the Hufitos, which I'm, goofily inspired by the Jovito tribe in Raiders of the Lost Ark. And upon first meeting them, Shakes and Percy turn and run away because they weren't sure what the Hufitos were doing, and they looked different, and so they just turned and ran. Well, in this next book, Shakes realized that wasn't a very nice thing to do just because they looked different. So he ends up learning their language and going to visit them again, and there's more to the book. Beyond that's just the first 3 pages. So that's what's next for Shakes and Percy, and that comes out first quarter of 2022. I should say that we're recording this in August of 2021. So that's next year.
Tim wants to know, where's Dottie? Also, do you hear the characters speaking in particular actor or film character story sounds like the Shirt Tales version of Bogey 2 in my head.
Shirt Tales, that's a reference from the early 80s that not many people may get. It was a short-lived cartoon on NBC in Saturday mornings. And that Bogey was loosely based on Humphrey Bogart, another 30s film reference. Not necessarily all of them, but for the Dash and Dottie stories, sometimes I do. Brophy is actually based on Edward Brophy, who played 2 roles in the Thin Man series. He played Brogan in The Thin Man Goes Home, and he was also in the first Thin Man film as one of the minor characters in that film as well. And he's sort of he's shorter than William Powell, but in Dash and Dottie, he's larger. I made him a polar bear. And so he's got, if you watch The Thin Man Goes Home, he's sort of a Brooklynite, kind of. and I'm not going to try and impersonate his voice because I'll just ruin it and my throat. But yeah, every so often in the Dash and Dottie stuff, or maybe even in the Bear from Ant books, I will have a certain voice in mind, but for the most part, it's all just my own insanity. As for Where is Dottie, Tim is referencing the fact that the first Dash and Dottie story is just Dash. And that's because I wanted to establish him first in the universe before the rest of the characters. And there will be a story coming up, I've got the basic idea already set, where we see how Dash met Dottie before he retires from detecting. Because obviously he meets Dottie and she keeps pushing him into all these detective roles. But in the first story, Dash is actually working a case that if you know The Thin Man, the actual film The Thin Man, I wrote a story based around the case that they talk about in secondhand in the Thin Man film. If you watch The Thin Man and they keep talking about Rosebreen, or you read the book by Dashiell Hammett and they talk about someone named Rosewater, that's the story that I wrote. I took the little elements that they gave in the movie and the book and wrote that story as the intro to Dash. So that's what When Murder Was in Bloom is in my head. And that's the intro to Dash. And then the second Dash and Dottie story actually debuts in 2 weeks on September 4th. And all of the Dash and Dottie stories from here on out. The first Dash and Dottie story was every 2 weeks, every Saturday, and starting from here on out on September 4th, Dash and Dottie stories are released weekly. So, but I'm glad you enjoyed it, Tim. And yes, Dottie is in the next story. So, in fact, not only is Dottie in the story, everyone that has been reading it is also asking me, what about Asta? How do you do Asta in a world where all of your characters are animals? And I did solve that problem. And I also managed to tweak in an homage to the artist Francesco Francavilla. But you kind of have to look for it. So, there's a teaser for you. So, what's next?
I need to read Dash and Dottie now. Jamie also asks, what is your next animal character going to be?
My next animal character is going to be the first time I do a canine lead character. And I don't want to say too much, but she will be introduced in a Dash and Dottie story early next year. The Dash and Dottie stories are quarterly. So the next Dash and Dottie story, starting in September, will end the year. And then the third Dash and Dottie story will start in January. And this character will start off as an adversary for Dash and Dottie and become the lead of her own series later on, but she'll be debuting in the third Dash and Dottie story. So.
Cool. The next few questions are about influences and inspirations.
Okay.
Thomas asked, what was your inspiration to write your first book?
I got fired. Laid off, technically. Didn't know what I was going to do, and the next day I remembered that picture I mentioned of your cow in a spacesuit.
My buddy.
And I was, again, in the shower, and the whole book hit me. Like a lightning bolt in the shower, which is dangerous, they say. And I finished the shower, I got out, I opened my laptop, I wrote the basic idea of the book in an hour, started doodling ideas for the cover, and emailed my wife, who normally at that point was getting up and leaving for work every morning at 4, and asked her what she thought when I woke up a few hours later, and she was like, run with it. The rest is history. So...
Jamar Nicholas wants to know, what's your why and what compels you to create?
Jamar Nicholas is another comic creator, he's been in independent books for a long time. If you've ever heard of Detective Boogaloo, or the Jamar Chronicles. That's him.
Or
He also adapted Fist Stick Knife Gun into a graphic novel, but he is now working on his own property for Scholastic, called Leon the Extraordinary, and it's a graphic novel we are very much looking forward to. Jamar is an amazing fellow, and he's also got a Patreon, and he does a podcast with Mike Manley from Marvel Comics and DC Comics called Pencil to Pencil, which is a fantastic resource if you're an aspiring artist. Definitely give that a watch every Wednesday at 8 on YouTube and Facebook. Just Google Pencil to Pencil and it'll pop up. Jamar is another one who has been a mentor to both of us, and we also consider him a friend. Excuse me. What compels me to create, I could be crass and say bills.
That's a good answer.
But when that first book was finished, back in 2014, I have drawn all my life, I have doodled all my life, but never seriously. It's never been something I ever thought of as a career. And I was so in love with the process, coming up with the ideas and getting them on paper and actually holding a book I created in my hand, a story I created from start to finish in my hand. I knew the art wasn't that great. I knew that I made mistakes along the way, and I knew that there would be improvements to be made, and I've made them. That there would be other stories, and it hit me like, a right cross that this was what I wanted to do, and it was like the light finally went off in my head after years of languishing in nonprofit work and retail work and social justice work and everything else I had done with my life. I had a purpose, and when that first kid smiled reading my book, and it wasn't this one, when someone other than my own child enjoyed my work, that was like the affirmation I needed that I had chosen properly. It's like, this one will laugh at my jokes, bad or good. More bad than good. But the fact that I was able to make other people happy with my stories, that is what drives me to keep going. And bills. Next up.
The next two are for Mike's massive list of questions.
Mike, you're killing us, man. 60 questions, please.
Yeah. Do you read any ongoing comic series? And what author would you like to sit down and have a conversation with?
Yes. I read Usagi Yojimbo. That's pretty much the only ongoing book I still read. As far as what other stuff I read, I generally read works by my friends and colleagues in children's graphic novels and children's books. Most recently, I read the first two books in the Max Meow series by John Gallagher and the first two Investigators books by John Patrick Green. I have, but have not read yet, Dragon Racer by Joey Weiser and Legend of Auntie Po by Shing Yin Kor. If y'all don't know Shing Yin Kor, please look up her work. She is an amazing creator who does work in two-dimensional, three-dimensional sculpture, painting, ink and pencil. I have never known anyone as creative as this woman, and every month she sends out postcards and letters to people that are just a joy to receive. And she is just ridiculously creative, and if the world had more people like her in it, it would be a far better place.
She's also really nice.
Yeah, she's also really nice. And then Joey Weiser is a very quirky guy, but he loves kaiju, and it shows in his books. He did Ghost Hog, last year, and this is the follow-up to that book, which was a very fun graphic novel, despite the fact that it starts with the main character dying. Just, I know that sounds weird, but go with it. So that's the stuff I read of late. As for an author I would love to sit and chat with, I gotta say Leonard Wibberley, who wrote The Mouse That Roared, which is one of my all-time favorite books. It's a book about this very, very tiny nation stuck in the Alps that goes to war with the United States and inadvertently wins. And when I say inadvertently, I mean this country is smaller than Central Park, shows up the day of an air raid, and because they've done this, they declare victory, and there's no one around to dispute them. And so they take home the atomic bomb, and that's it. And then America realizes that their most, powerful weapon is now in this tiny little country in the Alps, and they have to go, tail tucked between their legs and say, "Please give us our weapon back." It's a brilliant satire. It was made into a very good film in '59, I believe, with Peter Sellers, but the book is so much better, and I would love to sit down and chat with Wibberley about his mind. So yeah, I think Wibberley would be. With Mikhail Bulgakov second, who wrote The Master and Margarita, which is another one of my favorite books of all time.
Can I borrow it?
Yeah, oh yeah.
Cool. So these next questions are like about your books and projects and stuff.
Okay.
Steve Conley asks, how do you decide what your next projects will be? Cue the elevator music or Jeopardy theme song.
It just kind of depends on where the characters are. I try to, with the Bear from Ant books, it usually ends up becoming sort of a natural progression of where did I leave the characters off in the last one. And with the Shakes books, it's even more so, because I don't want to tell a story that seems to regress the characters, and I realize that sounds weird because I'm not telling books with a lot of character depth or room for, Tale of Two Cities or that kind of level of character growth. But I try to at least have the characters learn and grow and become better with each book. So, my ideas also are basically just based around puns. So each project it just generally rolls out of what would the character do next. As far as series go, it's whatever I have time for. I'm now basically working on 6 series: Shakes, Bear from Ant, Dash and Dottie. We've got a Hippopotamus comic book coming out. There's the Moose Lamb series. There's this sequel out of Dash and Dottie. That's 6. I'm sure I'm forgetting. Oh, there's the Choose Your Own Adventure style books with the Steer Your Own Story that I've got to do the second one of. So that's 7 series. So, huh? Well, that's not my book. So, yeah, it most of the time it just depends on where the idea fits in the growth of the character.
Because J. Robert Dean's is the gift that keeps on giving. Let's move on. Mike wants to know, which books are you most proud of?
I'm going to say Caterpillar Drive, which is the 4th Bear from Ant book. And then MOO Thousand and Pun. MOO Thousand and Pun I'm proud of because I got it done. So many people start a book and then don't finish. With Caterpillar Drive, one of the underpinnings of the book is that it is a message to young children finding themselves as whether our culture seems to have a hang up about children and sexual identity, gender identity, and whether or not that's a legitimate thing. Well, it is. And I addressed that in this 4th book where Tyler is, who up to at this point, it was a caterpillar, becomes a butterfly, which is a natural progression for insects. This particular insect, butterflies come from caterpillars. Caterpillars always turn into butterflies. But I wrote it as, not all caterpillars become butterflies. Some become moths. Some don't transition at all. And so I wrote this storyline where Tyler is nervous about transitioning because of how his family's going to react. Because all of his family are moths, and, he's nervous about what he's going to become. And he's isolated from his family, and his true family is really the people that he works with at ANT, at Animal United Network headquarters. Animal United Network Task Force. And he transitions, he comes out of the cocoon, he's a butterfly, and he's, loving being a butterfly, but then he's kidnapped, and it turns out he's kidnapped by a group of insects who don't think that insects should transition. And it's, it becomes this, all of Ant rallies around, let's find our kid. And they find him. I'm giving away the story of the book. It's probably poor salesmanship. But they rescue Tyler, and there's a dust up with the group. I leave it at that. But I had a reader. I always have pre-readers for all my books, and I actually had a trans person read this book, because this is not me saying overtly trans rights. This is me producing a story that tries to at least tell a kid who may or may not be going through this, or could be going through anything that young kids go through at that age, in the 7 to 12 age, saying it's okay. You're going to be okay. There are people who will support you no matter what. Once you find those people, your life will be fine. And the reader said, I wish I had this book when I was 12. And it would have meant the world to me. That made me feel good about the book I wrote. That validated the story I was trying to tell. I was not trying to be overt about a trans story. I was trying to write a book that was supportive of not just that, but of anyone in a similar position, be it trans rights, be it maybe a kid in a mixed household that got bullied for it. There's so many things kids get bullied for that are just ridiculous. So that's the book I'm proudest of. And then again, MOO THOUSAND and PUN, just because I started it and finished it. Excuse me.
Yeah, trans rights. Mike also asked, do you recommend the self-publishing? Sorry, there was a question that made me laugh. Mike
No. No.
Do you recommend the self-publishing method, and have you ever been approached by a publisher?
I've not been approached by a publisher.
Not yet.
I'm small potatoes right now.
Wait, not yet.
All right, fine.
Not yet.
As for recommending self-publishing, do your research. It's expensive. It's labor-intensive. And it takes a while to figure out how to do it right. And one of the biggest problems is printing is expensive. We're transitioning, ironic timing, to doing all of our books in paperback. We had originally been printing them in hardback, but printing costs have skyrocketed in the past year and a half. And it's no longer cost effective. We either have to go all digital or paperback. So we're going paperback. These are things that you have to roll with. You have to be able to pivot and roll with the punches and not take them as personal defeats. You also will have to get used to the idea of having long periods of inactivity, and meaning you're going to be working constantly on your own stuff, while on the outside people think you're nowhere, and then just suddenly a book appears. So it is a lot of work, but you don't have anyone telling you what to do. So be ready to hire a good editor or find a good editor. Do your research. Publish through channels that will get you into the bookstores. And you can do this well. One thing I will say is do not fall for anyone who offers to sell your book for you for $3,000. Those are predatory scenarios and individuals and companies where they'll give you 10 copies of your book. No. If someone offers you for $3,000 to $5,000 to publish your book and then give you a handful of copies, you're being sold a bill of goods. Ignore that. Take extra time, do your research, and you can do just fine. You're not going to make a lot of money. You're still going to struggle to pay bills, which is why I have a Patreon. The Patreon honestly helps me do what I do and worry just a little bit less about, having to find other jobs, other freelance jobs to pay the bills. Eventually I hope to not need a Patreon, but the Patreon is actually good because it tells me that I have people out there that enjoy my work enough to keep me wanting to make that work happen. So Patreon support is also an amazing thing. So again, thank you to my patrons. So yes, self-publishing is definitely worth it, but you do have to do your research. Excuse me.
Connor also wanted to know, will there be any more Bear from Ant books? Hey, Connor.
Yes. I am currently redoing all of the old Bear from Ant books because I discovered when I was working to make them into paperbacks that I was a much better writer now than I was when I started. And I had more to tell of those stories that I had written. So they are coming out as paperbacks, and they're about 30% longer, and I'm also redoing the art. But on the plus side, they're also cheaper. So hopefully, if you've already bought them, I apologize, but hope you don't mind buying them again. So the old books are coming back out, and Bear from Ant 6, the first draft, has already been done. And I've got 4 ideas already scribbled in various notebooks for the following Bear from Ant books. So yes, there will at least be 10 Bear from Ant books total. Shooting for 1 a year. So yeah, you're good. You'll be fine. Next up.
Vic. Hi, Vic. Asked, you get to remake the Thin Man movies of the actors currently alive. Who do you cast in the roles?
I'm surprised we only got one Thin Man question, given my reputation. If you go, okay, you have to do it as a period piece because it's centered so much around Prohibition. If you make it a strict remake of the book, in which Nora is 15 years younger, then I would cast Elizabeth Olsen as Nora. If you go with Nick and Nora are a little closer in age, then I would cast Emily Blunt. Both of them have the sense of humor. Both of them have the acting chops. Both of them are quite intelligent. And both of them are attractive and have the sort of pointy-ish nose that Myrna Loy had, that they could do that scrunch that she is so fondly remembered for. Nick is slightly harder, but thanks to the Marvel Universe, we've seen a slightly roguish individual in that setting. And if you combine his character with Chris Evans' character, I think you get Nick Charles. And that's Dominic Cooper, who played Howard Stark in the first Captain America film. He's got the look, he's got the skill, and he's played that sort of suave, debonair character, and he played Ian Fleming in a bio series. So I think he would make a good Dick, and either Elizabeth Olsen or Emily Blunt, depending on what age you cast Nora as. So that's what I would do. And by the way, that's why Dash and Dottie exist, is because, it's easier to create my own than try and fight for the rights to do a copy. So.
Okay. Some questions about yourself. This is a question I really want to know. Jamar Nicholas wants to know, what's been your favorite nickname he's given you?
Jamar likes to give nicknames. Totally cool. He's given me several.
More than Mike has asked questions.
Not that many.
Close.
But the best nickname that Jamar has given me is based on the fact that I was his first Patreon supporter. So he calls me number 1, a.k.a. Riker. And why I think that's so appropriate is people always make fun of the fact that in Next Generation, Riker is always leaning against stuff, walking funny, or sitting in chairs weird. Well, the reason is, like me, Frakes broke his back, had a serious back injury before he started that show. I broke my back 10 years ago, and I never had surgery to fix it, so I still have this broken back. I have 3 messed up discs all over the place in my lower back. So I also have to sort of lean funny, walk funny, sit in chairs funny. So it's appropriate that he calls me number 1. So there you go. That's my answer, Jamar. There you go.
Okay. Alan asks, Riker, listen to music when writing or plotting? If so, what's your go-to music?
I always listen to music when I'm writing. In fact, I make playlists appropriate to what I'm writing. So when I'm writing Dash and Dottie, I'm usually listening to music from the 20s, 30s, and 40s. When I'm writing, say, Bear from Ant, I pull together music that will help me write, give me tempo, and also songs that go along with the plot of what I'm writing. I'll even do that for Shakes, Moo Slams, whatever I'm writing, I will create a playlist. In fact, patrons have started, I haven't sent another one in a while, but patrons get playlists. They don't get full playlists, because usually my playlists are about 200 or 300 songs. They'll get a snippet playlist, basically, like 15, 20 songs of what I listen to. My go-to, when I'm not like specifically, but usually every playlist is going to have some selection from a James Horner soundtrack, Peter Gabriel, Kate Bush, Kodo, which is a taiko drumming troupe out of Japan, and probably the Sundays, which is one of my favorite acts out of England, although they only put together 3 albums. So.
Cool. Mike, again, asked, this is script. Where did you learn your craft? Did you study art or writing in college?
Neither. I did take art classes in school up through high school, but every teacher I had was teaching style over tools. And so I didn't rebel necessarily, but the lesson I got out of that was art class was not for me. If I had teachers like my friend Jamar, who was an art teacher, or Mike Hawthorne, who was an art teacher, the Marvel artist, who if you go to his website, he actually sells his art instruction books on anatomy, and they're fantastic. If I'd had teachers like that who taught fundamentals as opposed to style, I would be a far better artist than I am now. So mostly I'm self-taught. I started drawing Snoopy when I was like 3. Tom and Jerry, Garfield, all that stuff. So that's mostly, everything is self-taught. My perspective sucks. I can't draw machines, but I keep writing myself machines to draw. But I get better every day just because I try to practice every day, which is the biggest lesson I can say is, just draw every day and you'll just get better every day. It won't be leaps and bounds, but, incremental improvement is improvement.
A few questions that couldn't be categorized. Wendy wants you to tell her, where is Grant's tomb?
Grant's Tomb. I won't tell you where it is, but I will happily put you in a cab that sends you there. So.
Okay. Artist Sean Von Gorn, he demands to know,
Yes.
Who do you think you are?
Keep reading.
To which writer Bob France replied to Von Gorman, what gives you the right?
To Sean, I say, Mr. Big Stuff, but that's kind of arrogant. And Bob, I would say, leave Sean alone unless he's potentially Yarnak. So, we're just going to leave it there. She'll never get that.
Mm-mm. And now, to end up the AMA 25 rapid fire questions.
Yep, let's go.
Alright, ready?
Yep.
Do you like watching documentaries? If so, what kind?
Yes, any kind as long as they're well produced, because the best thing you can ever do is keep learning.
Nice. What types of music do you like?
Pretty much all types. I'm not a fan of 70s and early 80s middle American rock. So, like John Kilgore, Mellencamp, not a fan. That kind of stuff. But I love most international music. Ireland, Russia, Japan, China, Korea. Not like K-pop stuff, but like traditional music of the countries from where it comes. The music has sort of evolved more out of their methods of communicating to each other, like to the fishing boats and stuff like that, which is how taiko drumming became a thing. That sort of stuff. I love that sort of stuff in film scores. So,
where did you grow up?
I grew up in Central Virginia, but I was born in South Carolina. I escaped.
Yep. Who asked this? Why aren't you smiling in the photo?
I am smiling in the photo. Next.
Who would win in a fight, a cow or a penguin?
Penguins usually get kind of passed over. They're people don't think they can do much because they're generally considered featherweights. But never doubt a cow, especially if it's an expert in mujitsu. Next.
Yeah. If you could write a mainstream comic book character, who would it be? Which would it be?
I'd love to tackle the Justice Society, but probably the best one suited to my talents would be Captain Carrot.
Yeah, probably would. Do you still accept fist bumps at cons?
No. Well, it depends on who it is, honestly. I'm still immunocompromised, and I have to be careful.
Let's just pretend that we're not in a pandemic.
If we weren't in a pandemic, yeah, absolutely, totally. But because of the pandemic, I have to be careful. Elbow taps are totally acceptable, though. But please don't be offended when I then break out the Purell. I have to.
Do you like pineapple on pizza?
Yes, but not in the traditional sense. Pineapple being sweet and tomatoes being a fruit as well. I think that works better with something slightly saltier, like pepperoni or salami, and then also with some pickled chilies, green chilies.
Me too. What is your favorite MCU movie?
Captain America: First Avenger, no doubt.
That was fast. Star Wars or Star Trek?
Trek.
Do you like spicy food?
Yes, but I don't go hunting for it. I'm not one of these guys who has to prove their masculinity by eating hot food. So I'm not performative in that way. I don't feel the need to show off. But I like I love Korean food, so yeah.
I don't feel the need to prove my masculinity either.
Well, there's kind of a good reason there.
Which Batman do you prefer? Keaton, Clooney, Kilmer, Affleck, West, Bale, or Clooney? Third.
Well, Mike asked that question, and he forgot Wilson and Lowry, who are the two Batmen who from the serials from 1940s, and also forgot Kevin Conroy, who voiced probably the best version of Batman, which is the Batman animated series version. But sticking to the ones he listed, I'm an Adam West guy.
Me too. Ginger, Marianne, or Miss Howell?
People sleep on Miss Howell. She's a lovely young woman. Natalie Schaefer was a gorgeous woman. But the character she portrayed was just a ridiculous character. But I have to go with Marianne.
Are you a wine, beer, or liquor guy? If so, what brands do you prefer?
Most of the stuff produced in in the Americas is swill. I was spoiled by Oktoberfest in Munich. And Berlin and Belgium. So I will, and also, of course, for health reasons, I can't drink any of the other stuff. But if I'm able to quickly to sort of prepare for it, I will absolutely indulge in a good, true Trappist ale.
Who as your movie/TV star dream girl when you were younger? When you were a younger lad?
Who was my crush when I was a kid?
Okay.
Basically. Probably Maren Jensen and Aaron Gray.
Not Myrna Loy?
Myrna Loy came later.
All right.
I was younger watching Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers, and it was a while before I saw the Thin Man movies.
Gotcha. What is your favorite sport?
Formula One. That's pretty much the only sport I watch.
Apple or Microsoft?
Microsoft. Apple and Microsoft crash just as much as each other, and you can tinker more with Microsoft. Or PCs.
Disk. So floppy disk? I don't know. Isn't that a service? Not a service? Never mind. What's the best concert you've ever been to?
There are two. There was a free concert by the Yellow Jackets, an amazing jazz group, that they gave in Richmond back in the late 80s, early 90s. So much so that they didn't play my favorite 3 songs of theirs, and I don't even care. It was just such an amazing show. And then when you and your mom took me to see Kodo a few years ago, and that if you can ever see a traditional taiko Japanese drumming troupe live, please do so. It's amazing. They're fantastic.
Do you have any pets? If so, what are their names?
I have a Kidlet. Does that count? I'm allergic to anything with fur, so no. I just write draw books about them.
Were you a big fan of the Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV series?
Yeah. I had to have been. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing my own version of it with Bear from Ant. But, like that, the Avengers, not the Marvel version, but the, Emma Peel and John Steed. All that stuff was reruns back when I was a kid, and I ate it all up. 60s spy TV, absolutely. Most of my films and TV stuff all basically happened between the 30s and 60s, and that's all I tend to watch now.
Do you traditionally draw? Do you draw traditionally or on a computer?
Both. I will draw both on a tablet or on paper. Sometimes I will do pencils digitally and then print it out in ink on the paper, and then color it digitally. Or sometimes I'll do all of it. Like commissions, I'll do all on paper. So yeah, I'm comfortable with both.
Do you prefer Hulk Hogan or Ric Flair?
Not a wrestling fan. Sorry, not my thing.
We were just talking about this like a few hours ago.
There you go.
Will you come over for dinner? What would you like to be served? I don't know who asked this question.
Mike. Sure.
Of course you did. Yeah, it's free food.
I'm diabetic, so I'm more protein and colorful veg. My favorite meal is thick pork chops with fresh microwaved corn on the cob, and I'm very specific about that because that's the only way to do corn on the cob. Do not boil it. You wash away all the nutrients. And sweet potatoes with just a little bit of butter.
Cool. What's your favorite color?
Living color. And there's a reference that maybe 10% of you will get. Anything else?
The last question, the final question is from Mike, the man of 67 questions.
Right.
What is your deepest, darkest secret?
I'm really 3 penguins in a human suit. Bye, everybody.